Hello, this tutorial is designed to help you create cut files for the shopbot at Maker Nexus. We're going to use Fusion 360 to generate the files. This is the puck that or coaster that we make whenever we teach the hands-on version of the class. So we'll use that as our example. Uh, I'm not going to show you how to draw this. There are hundreds of tutorials available online to teach you the ins and outs of Fusion 360. I'm going to streamline this to take geometry that's already been created and create the files needed to make this happen on the shopbot. So here we have the item, the geometry, the design, the extruded model, whatever you want to call it. I did this in the design tab. We're going to go to the manufacture tab of Fusion 360. Since I already have one, I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to create a new one. So here's my model. First thing I do is I come over and I create a new setup. Setup is basically a setup for doing machining of some variety. I click New Setup. I need to select whether I'm going to mill or turn or 3D print or whatever like that. We're going to be doing what's essentially milling, so that's good. The work coordinate system, since I drew this and I used the correct plane so that my z-axis is pointing up, I don't have to change the work coordinate systems. However, if you happen to draw yours so that the z-axis is pointing another direction, you need to rearrange your model so that you get it such that x and y are flat on your material and z is pointing up, because that's where z is supposed to be. Okay, I'm going to use one of the corners of the stock as my origin point. You can see that my model is the origin is the center top of it because that was convenient when I'm drawing it. I actually want it to be down here in the lower left-hand corner as my origin. So I'm going to go to stock and I'm going to create the size of my material. By default, it says you just want it to be a little bit bigger than your item. I'm planning on using a fixed size material. Let's say it's going to be 6 inches by 6 inches. Seems like a reasonable size. So what that is that's going to be a block of material. By default, it comes in even inches. My model is actually 0.972 inches thick because that's how thick the material is that I've been using for teaching the class. So I'm going to make the actual thickness of my stock to be 972, and I got to go back there and finish doing that. Okay, so 0.972 is the thickness. It's 6 by 6. I want to go back here and I'm going to create my origin to be the lower left-hand corner, which is going to be this one right here. Now you can see that my X and my Y and my Z are aligned here. So this means that my Z0 is going to be on the table and that X and Y are going to be positive. It's good. I'm going to click OK. So we're going to use an engraving tool to engrave the logo. So I'm going to go over here to 2D, my 2D choices. Notice I have 2D and 3D and drilling and so on. We're going to just use 2D today. I'm going to click on the engrave choice. So over here I have 5 tabs. I need to fill out at least 4 of them. First thing we're going to do is we need to pick which tool we're going to use to cut that. I've already predefined 2. There's a large library that you can go through. You can also create your own or import libraries that have been created for you. I created earlier a tool number 3, which is actually a 1/2 inch wide engraving V-bit. Select that. It selects my tool. I have a choice of coolant or not. Since the shopbot doesn't have coolant, I'm going to disable it so it doesn't confuse it. Spindle speed, let's use 12,000. My ramp speed, I'm also going to go 12,000 RPM. My cutting feed rate, let's go with 120 inches per minute. 120 inches per minute. Lead in feed rate, we're going to use 75. Lead out, same thing, 75. Ramp feed rate, 75. Plunge feed rate, 75. It's great. Next is geometry. This is basically saying, what do you want to cut out? So nothing's been selected, so I'm going to go over here with the pointer and I'm going to select the top of these 3 choices right here. Notice the top and not the bottom. That will give me a very different choice. And it says I got 3 chains, which I can acknowledge that that's exactly what I wanted to do. Okay, next up is heights. By default, what it does is it gives you a nice view of where the cutting heights are going to be. In this case, the only thing we've got is clearance and retract. I'm a fan of either using the model top or stock top as your height for all of these. So top height is my selected contour, that's good. Okay, so this is basically where does the tool start from. This is a matter of how safe do you feel with the tool traveling across there. 4/10 of an inch is plenty of clearance for most operations. Next up, it's going to say passes. We don't really need to make multiple passes because we're just engraving. And the last one is linking, which we mostly ignore for the shop bot. I'm going to click OK, and it's going to generate my toolpath and give me an idea what it's going to look like. If I'm curious what's going to happen, I can come up here under Actions, and I can click on the Simulate. When I click on Simulating, by default, the stock isn't shown. It's just going to show you the toolpath, but I like to see what's going to happen and actually cut out of the material. Down here at the bottom, I have a play button. When I push the play button, it shows me what's actually going to happen. For some reason, even though I selected the geometry in a different order, it decided to optimize and do it in the middle one, then each side. No explanation. So there's a good simulation of what it is. I click close over here. Next thing I want to do is I want to cut this out of my material. So I'm going to do another 2D operation. This time I'm going to do what's called a contour, which basically means follow some geometry and cut along some lines. So I'm going to do a 2D contour. I'm going to go back to my tool selection. I'm going to go back and select my tool selection. This time I'm going to use my 1/4 inch down spiral, my all-purpose cutting tool that I use in the shop all the time. Again, I set this up earlier. It's a 1/4 inch wide, about an inch of cutting length and all that. Okay, I don't need any flood coolant. I'd prefer to have no coolant. This is good. 16,000 RPM is a good choice for this. 100 inches per minute is a nice rate. Looks like these are all set up very nicely from before. Again, these can be set. You can customize these to whatever you like. There are hints online, and when you take the class at Maker Nexus, we'll give you a handout that gives you suggested feeds for different materials. Okay, moving on. Geometry. It's what do you want to cut? I want to cut this line on the bottom down here. Notice that there's an arrow. This arrow tells me which side of the material I'm going to cut on. So right now it's on the outside, which is what I wanted to do. If I click on the arrow, it'll move over to the inside and it'll show me that I'm going to cut on the inside of the line, not what I want, but good to know I have the choice. Okay, so there's my geometry selection. I really don't want to make this all in one cut because that would probably be pretty loud and really hard on the tool. So I'm actually going to go to the next tab. Actually, we're going to start with heights here. So again, I like to use the model top for model top and stock top, which in this case are the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to, my clearance is 4/10 of an inch above my retract height, which is how far do you go between passes and so on. Feed height 2/10 down. The top height, which is where am I going to start cutting from, and the top of the stock or the top of the model would be a good place. And how far down to cut, basically the selected contour, which was the bottom of the material. Super. As I was saying, I really don't want to do this all in one pass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do multiple depths. And on multiple depths, I'm going to say I want to do this 1/8 of an inch at a time, which is great. I have the choice of basically finishing a smaller cut. Doesn't much matter in wood, so I'm going to skip over that. Okay, and stock to leave is also if you are going back with a smaller cutting tool. We're going to leave that unchecked. It's very good. And linking, again, we skip over this mostly. I'm going to click OK. And it's going to tell me here's what's going to happen. So here's my my path for that. Let's do a quick preview and then fix it later. You'll notice over here that there's lead in, so basically it leads in, goes around, and leads out. It's not what I want to do, but let's do a quick simulation and see what that looks like anyways. Okay, so I'm going to do the simulation, and I'm going to click play. So it's going to go around. It's going to come back in. This is being inefficient because it keeps coming up and down. So we can do better than that. This would work, but there's a better way. Let's finish this up really quickly here. Want to make sure that it cuts all the way to the bottom. And it looks like it did not, so we'll need to fix that as well. Since I still see some green, this means that my path is incorrect and I need to fix it so that it cuts all the way through my material. Okay, so there's two things missing. One, we didn't cut all the way through the material, and two, we didn't leave tabs there. So we're going to go back and double click on this and fix those few things. Okay, so we got this is fine, the geometry is fine. My heights, I'm actually going to change this, and I'm going to go all the way to the model bottom with an offset of 0 inches because I really don't want to cut into the table. So I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom of the model. Actually, let's go all the way to the bottom of the stock. That should be the same thing. Okay, so on the passes, we need to change the multiple depths. Stop. So what we're going to do is we're going to select ramp right here. So what ramp will do is instead of stepping down one pass at a time, it'll do a continuous spiral. Let's see how that works. And we're going to remove the lead in and lead out. That was that little hook on the side. Let's recalculate, see what this one looks like. Oh, this looks like a nice spiral. All right, let's do a simulate, see what it looks like. Do our simulation. Speed it up. Much faster. And we go all the way through, but we still forgot to do the ramp, to the tabs. Okay, so let's fix that too. Gonna leave this. We're gonna go back to our angle right here. Double click on the contour. Over here in the geometry, where we selected our geometry, we have a choice of tabs. When we selected yes, we want tabs, we have the choice of being rectangular or triangular. And we can either do them every so often, or we can say, I want to pick the place to put them. So let's put a tab here and put a tab over here on the other side. That should be enough to hold it in place. I'm going to say OK, it'll recalculate. And this time we have tabs. So if I click on setup, I will get both of my tool paths. Let's do a simulate. This time we can see that we actually left a little bit of a tab on there. That's great. Okay, so now that we have what we want, we are going to save these paths. So this is where we move to the next item over in the post-process section. We're going to click one tool path at a time. I'm going to click post-process. So the first time you do this, you'll need to search for the ShopBot post configuration, and there are actually two of them. One of them is called ShopBot ISO, and this one makes G-code, which is not preferred. The other one is called OpenSBP, ShopBot OpenSBP, and what that is creates a normal ShopBot file like we've looked for. You can give your file a name here, and you can put a description, which will show up in the file itself. And we click post, and it says, what do you want to call it? Where do you want to put this? I'll say save. Since I checked the box that says show me the code, it actually opens up an editor so you can look at and see all your glorious ShopBot code and get an idea if it's what you wanted. It's really hard to read, so in general. So, okay, that's great. So I saved the one for the engraving toolpath. Now I want to save the post process there. This time I'm going to say don't show me that. This one we're going to call cutout, and I'm going to post it and call it cutout. And there's my files. So I'll take those to the ShopBot and run them. Now the advantage or disadvantage, as you may call it, of using this here is that you are not able to use the auto zero function available on the Maker Nexus ShopBot. So you'll have to do the manual Z zeroing. And again, remember, we suggest using the table because that's the safest. This concludes our lecture. Thank you for your attention.